Welcome to episode 236 of the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I'm Ashley Scott Myers, screenwriter and blogger over at sellingyourscreenplay.com. Today I'm interviewing writer-director York Alec Shackleton, who just did a feature film called 211 starring Nicolas Cage. We talked through his early years as a professional snowboarder and then doing some edgy documentaries and how he was able to turn those experiences into a career as a feature film writer and director. So stay tuned for that interview. First, though, we have a special announcement from filmmaker Ron Newcomb, who's put together a film summit in August in the Washington, D.C. area. So here is Ron to tell us about the summit and a little bit about his background. Welcome, Ron, to the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. Thanks for coming on the show today.
Hey, Ashley, I really appreciate you having me.
So in a minute, we're going to talk about your upcoming VIP Film Summit, but I thought first, maybe you could tell us a little bit about your background. Where did you grow up and how did you get interested in the entertainment business?
Yeah, I grew up just outside of Washington, D.C. My dad was a cop, and so I grew up in the suburbia of the D.C. area, and of course grew up in the 70s and 80s where we had the epic 80s fantasy and just fell in love with the power of film, as so many of us did. And in particular, I remember watching Of Mice and Men, this black and white TV version, and it brought me to tears. And I was probably only about 7 years old, but it just imprinted on my little brain back then the power of cinema and the power of story. And so, like most of us, again, I started to do little plays and stories with friends, played a lot of role-playing games. I'd be a jock, Monday through Friday, but then I'd sneak out to my buddy's house on Saturday and we go play role-playing games. So it really primed the pump for my imagination. And it wasn't until I got a little older and really tried acting, because I went to a college, they didn't really have many sports, so I tried acting out, fell in love with acting. That was my doorway into film. And then actually when I was a police officer, I met another cop buddy of mine. I had kind of self-taught myself how to format a script and had written a screenplay and found out another cop buddy of mine was desiring to be an actor. So he read the script, fell in love with the script, and then he later told me, hey, man, I'm going to do a movie. This was right when digital first started to kind of be a thing. Mm-hmm. And I was so impressed with what he did. The guy's name is Jim Clock. He's now an actor out in L.A., just did a film opposite Keanu Reeves. So he's done pretty well for himself. Yeah. But that sparked in me the ability and the desire that we could do it, that the playing field has become a little bit more level and that we could do it if we just did it together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, perfect. So let's dig into your VIP Film Summit. Maybe to start, you can just tell us what it's all about.
Yeah, this really is my desire at the beginning of the year, just trying to make a commitment to level up my filmmaking, whatever that might mean. And so I designated 3 primary areas. I could level up by either getting a manager or an agent or meeting with a development exec. Number 2 is I could find the right producing partner, because how many indie filmmakers say, oh, I'm going to get myself on Netflix and stuff, and you run down that rabbit hole. It's very difficult to become a Netflix original. Mm-hmm. So the right producing partner, or third, to find investors and to make it myself. Now, I've done films in the past. I did a film that was international release, got on the shelves of Walmart, and did well enough to kind of get me addicted to this whole thing, but not well enough to send me on a full trajectory, full-blown career. So I've had to dip back into the workforce. But this is my desire to bring those people. I'm flying in managers, agents, producing partners, and investors to the DC area in hopes, quite honestly, so that we can all get stuff in production, in various stages of production. I came off of a TV show last year, and when I turned to pivot, there just wasn't anything else hiring in our area. And instead of waiting around for the state to get the tax incentives right, I just decided, you know what? Let's get these people here. And the more I started to talk to other filmmakers, particularly writers, they were excited about that potential opportunity. Like, wow, it's like a no-brainer. They'd gone to Pitch Fest, but I wanted to not only be able to pitch people, but I wanted to hear what they had to say. I wanted a great networking opportunity. And those are the things that I've kind of set up. So there's 3 predominant panels, and then 10 filmmakers get up and do a 90-second pitch. And writers know what that is, pretty much like the logline and maybe a quick synopsis. The desire is to get to that second meeting. The desire, the goal is not necessarily to close the deal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, perfect. So who is a good, you just mentioned a whole array of things. Who is a good sort of your perfect attendee? Who are the people that could get the most out of this summit?
It's definitely someone. You don't need to have a finished script. It's someone that is more than an idea, though. You have the log line, you have the synopsis. You may or may not have done a film in the past. You yourself are looking to level up. You're looking for that right producing partner to pull you up to that next level. That would be ideal. Or maybe you've had some marginal success and you've had some, meaning that you've won some festivals with your scripts and you're looking for that agent or that manager and you just can't get the right one on the phone. Or you're the producing type and you don't know where the money is and how can I speak to investors. And so it's those three kind of tiered people. The best ones I usually see it's the writer-producer types. It's generally those that have written something and are also ready to produce or co-produce the project.
Okay. And maybe you can talk a little bit about some of the guests. Who do you have coming out to speak and network at this event?
Man, so our investors, we have several. We have someone representing a large China fund. So we're always hearing about this China money. This guy that's the other thing. I really wanted to vet these people, legitimate people, because people talk in this industry, as we all know. So I have another one that's a film fund manager, or a fund manager rather, of some military investments. That's what's kind of local to the DC area. And they're interested to hear about new opportunities in exploring entertainment. I have a company called Electus coming. So if you've seen Marco Polo on Netflix, these guys do a lot of reality television. I have two different managers that they rep producers, writers, and directors. So my goal was to give a wide breadth of people to get them on board, to get them in the boat. I've got Tom Malloy coming, Franco Sama coming. These guys are the producing partners. These are ones where they can get you in front of Netflix, and legitimately so. Like, you can really look them up and certify they are who they say they are. So, the ball's in everyone else's court. I'm trying to row as fast as I can and do what I can. I do hope people come. You and I were just talking, just the networking alone should be worth the price of admission.
Yeah, for sure. And do you have some dates you want to throw out? The early bird special ends at some point, and then when is the actual event date?
Yeah, the event date is August 25th, and the early bird special ends at the end of July. And so you want to make sure you take advantage of it. It's going to be at the Dulles Marriott. So we do have some people flying in. You could stay. I have some rooms reserved at the Dulles Marriott, and you have to reserve them by the end of the month to get the rate. But August 25th, it's pretty much going to be, I figure if you're coming, I want to pack this thing. So it's from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m.
And it's just one day only?
It's one super powerhouse day.
Okay.
So
perfect, Ron. Well, it sounds like a great event. I'm on the West Coast, so I won't be able to attend, but I wish I was still there, because it sounds like a fantastic event. And I wish you the best of luck with it.
No, I appreciate it, Ashley. And keep doing what you're doing, man. I love what you're doing as well.
Perfect. Thank you.
So a big thanks to Ron for putting this summit together and coming on the show to tell us about it. There's really not that many opportunities like this in the Mid-Atlantic area. So if you live on the East Coast, I really can't recommend this event strongly enough. For less than $150, you get a full day of learning and networking, and it's hard for me to imagine that this wouldn't be worth your time and money. So definitely check this out if you live anything close to the Washington, D.C. area. Again, I'll put the link in the show notes, but if you want to try and go directly there, the URL is literally www.vipfilmsummit.com. If you find this episode valuable, please help me out by giving me a review in iTunes, or leaving a comment on YouTube, or retweeting the podcast on Twitter, or liking or sharing it on Facebook. These social media shares really do help spread word about the podcast, so they're very much appreciated. Any websites or links that I mention in the podcast can be found on my blog in the show notes. I also publish a transcript with every episode in case you'd rather read the show or look at something later on. You can find all the podcast show notes at www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/podcast, and then just look for episode number 236. If you want my free guide, How to Sell a Screenplay in 5 Weeks, you can pick that up by going to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. It's completely free. You just put in your email address and I'll send you a new lesson once per week for 5 weeks, along with a bunch of bonus lessons. I teach the whole process of how to sell your screenplay in that guide. I'll teach you how to write a professional logline and query letter and how to find agents, managers, and producers who are looking for material. Really is everything you need to know to sell your screenplay. Just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. So a quick few words about what I'm working on. As mentioned over the last couple of weeks, The Pinch, the crime thriller feature film that I wrote, directed, and produced last year, is for a limited time available for sale on the website. Just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/thepinch, and The Pinch is all one word and all lowercase. I'm going to keep it up for sale on the website for the next couple of weeks, and then I'll be rolling it out to iTunes and Amazon after that. Also, for just an extra $5, you can bundle The Pinch with the 3-hour webinar I did on the making of the film. I go into great detail about every aspect of making this film, writing the screenplay, raising the money, and of course, producing the film. So this is a great chance to see the completed film as well as see the behind the scenes of how I actually got it to completion. So I'm now in the final push to prepare The Pinch for widespread distribution. I got the poster back this past week. I just want to do a shout out to Michael Koch, who is the graphic designer I've worked with on this poster. He did a fantastic design for this poster, and I'm really appreciative of him. He's a great designer living and working in the New York City area. If anyone needs any design work done, please do let me know. I can't recommend this guy enough. So again, a big thanks to Michael for being so patient with me and working incredibly hard to get this poster finished. So thank you, Michael, on that. I will be hopefully be able to show that to everybody next week. We're just getting the final versions laid out. I'm going to get a poster printed for the film festival that we're going to in August. So just some last minute things to get it tweaked. I was also tweaking the trailer last week, so I should have the final version of that trailer done hopefully again by this time next week, and I'll have something that I can link to maybe in the podcast episode next week. I also got my deliverables into the Action On Film Festival. That is the festival that we're premiering at in August. We got our screening date for Action On Film this past week as well. It's going to be Wednesday, August 22nd at 10 p.m. at the Brandon Theater, which is in the Palms Casino, again in Las Vegas. If you live in the Las Vegas area, please do stop by. It'd be great to meet some of the people who listen to this podcast. And so my goal right now, after the screening, we're going to do the screening in August at the Action On Film Festival. That's going to effectively be our world premiere. And then after that, I'll be releasing the film again through iTunes, Amazon, any of those other similar platforms. So late August, early September release. And then that'll be it. Then I'll start doing some promotion, trying just to generate some eyeballs and get some interest into the film. And then that'll be it. I'll be moving on to my next project. So that's The Pinch. Once again, if you have any interest in checking that out, just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/thepinch. So now let's get into the main segment. Today I am interviewing filmmaker York Alec Shackleton. Here is the interview. Welcome, York, to the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I really appreciate you coming on the show with me today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on.
So to start out, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your background. Where did you grow up and how did you get interested in the entertainment business?
Yeah, no problem. I grew up in Southern California, and, when I was really young, I was really into sports, skateboarding, snowboarding, that kind of stuff. And through my youth, I was doing a lot of that, and at the time, the sports were very new and they were emerging, and so there was a lot of people that had interest for commercials and different types of stunt work and stuff like that. So that was kind of in a weird way how I initially began in the industry. So through doing that, I was always very drawn to the behind the camera side of it, and I was always very interested in what that was entailing, and so I would spend as much time as I could just kind of watching it and trying to learn. And at one point I started. You just have to start, and so I started writing a little bit. I met a couple guys that had some experience and got some pointers from them and just started writing, and I wrote a little short film and we made it, and it was a little comedy. And we ended up getting a little award for it on the internet. And this was a while ago, long before there was YouTube or any of the official video sites. This was iFilm back in that time. And so I was like, well, I don't know, maybe we got something, So from that, I kind of try to be very analytical about it and create stepping stones for myself, knowing that I didn't have any experience from school. I didn't have really a lot of connections. And so I knew that I had to really master my craft. And so I was smart about choosing subjects that I know I could get made and that I could use the fundamentals of making films that I taught myself, ultimately, moving people emotionally with your story and your pictures and your sounds. And so I started doing some documentary films because I knew that I could really capture some explosive subjects and move people with that, and started choosing documentary style feature films where they were true stories about people, journals and stuff like that I would derive from. And I realized that you could really make some great films at really good prices and get a lot of it done on your own. So that's how I kind of did it myself and kind of kicked a lot of doors open.
Yeah. How many?
And then obviously you have to continue on.
Yeah, sure. How many of these shorts and documentaries, it sounds like you're basically self-funding these at this point, just trying to kind of get the ball rolling. How many of these did you do to kind of get the career going?
A little bit of that. I mean, the first short film, was self-funded. It didn't even cost any money. I had an apartment in Hollywood, and a buddy of mine who was a filmmaker, who was kind of mentoring me a little bit on writing, directed it for me. So he came over, we did it at my house. We used a couple friends who were actors, and we got that done. Mm-hmm. Then I went and I did a documentary in Tijuana on prostitution. It was more of like a human rights film exposing a lot of violence and corruption in the government. And that I needed a little bit of money for. So I went to a friend of mine who is a political family member, is Barry Goldwater, and he ended up producing it for me and kind of helped keep me out of trouble while I was doing it. Mm-hmm. And that was really about maybe $14,000, I think we spent to do that. And that film ended up going to Cannes Film Festival. And so when it went there, I got to meet a lot of great people, and I ended up getting myself invited to UCLA Film School. So when I went there, I studied marketing, development, and distribution of independent film because I wanted to understand the business side of it. So then from that point forward, I was really structuring a lot of the films and the production the way they were getting financed in a very traditional manner, but just simplifying it all down. So what I would do is I would obviously, write a screenplay that I knew everything was on the page and it would really work, and it was something that was designed for the marketplace at that time, whether it be horror at a certain time or, you got to do your research and you got to see what's selling at the markets and what the industry and each company that you're going to be going to, what they're specializing in. And so I would obviously develop the material, and then I would go and get myself some sort of real small limited distribution, no guarantee of any money, but just a guarantee that if the movie comes out and it gets completed, that they'll distribute it. Well, then that was enough for me to go and get a little bit of financing because I was only maybe looking for $50,000 or $100,000. And so I'd be able to get that through private resources that I just, would get connected to. I would then package the film with as strong of a cast as I could, try to get a couple names in there that are recognizable, nobody that is really pulling any A-list bankability, but people that you can recognize and are solid actors. And then we'd go make the film, and we'd complete the film, make our days, and ultimately deliver to the distributor and get them out in the market. Yeah. So it was really very quickly on that I kind of shifted into more of a traditional format of how films are put together, because it is a tricky business when it comes to that.
Yeah, and I'm curious, you're throwing around these terms, designed for the marketplace, getting a couple names, getting the distribution lined up, not necessarily a minimum guarantee, but getting that lined up. How did you get this experience sort of on the business side? Was that just from hanging around these other, Hollywood types that had some business experience? What would you recommend for people to gain the same sort of insight, just on sort of the fundamentals of the business?
So like I said, I got invited to UCLA, so I took marketing, development, and distribution. So I learned an enormous amount in those classes. And being at UCLA, you're right down the street from all the studios. So one of the classes specifically was pretty much speakers every single week. And it was a different person from the industry. You'd have studio heads coming through, different types of distributors, marketing teams. And these are people that are active right then, that day, doing something on a film that's about to come out. So you were really getting some great insight from some of these classes. And I would then kind of compound upon that, and I would start to go to AFM, the American Film Market, and I would see what was going on there, and I would go in the booths, and I would talk to distributors, and I would meet them. And through that, you can really begin to see how that side of the business works, that you can write a screenplay, you can get that movie made, and now you've made this film and it's completed, but it's going to take on this whole other life once it goes into the distribution chain. You got to think about how that film is going to be marketed and who it's going to be marketed to. So when I say fitting into the marketplace, it's more of educating yourself on what these distributors are selling, what types of films they're looking for, what actors are bankable in certain territories that are strong for certain distributors. There's just an enormous amount of information that's out there that you can go and get, and that'll help you when you make your decisions, both creatively and business-wise.
So like you just mentioned, just as a specific example, you just mentioned like knowing which actors are going to have value in which territories. How can you get that information? Is it as simple as just trying to network with distributors who are on the ground, making sales? Is there some resource that you maybe recommend?
Yeah, well, there isn't really, that's this one thing is, well, some of this information is, these distributors want to keep it for themselves because it's a lot of the data research that they're doing. Mm-hmm. But if you're at the shows and you have access to distributors' booths and you're in there, they're going to tell you, who they're hot for, who they want, who they're looking for. A lot of them will put out these reports. So if you are working with a studio or a distributor, they're going to give you that information of who at this moment in time in every, 6-month window, who's really on these A, B, and C lists of, what they would call bankability, I guess. Mm-hmm. And so you can get it, through those kind of channels, or really just being at the shows and the trade shows themselves. The information is just there. You can see who's hot because you can see what posters are up there, what films have the big money behind them, who's getting big P&A funds, and who they're using in them. Mm-hmm. And you can get a lot of it from just being there. That's where I would get most of the knowledge that I was getting, was just from being there and being around it and hearing and listening and being really observant of everything that's going on.
Yeah. So that's great. Good practical tips. Just real quickly, I want to just talk about, you mentioned you took the documentary to Cannes. Maybe you can talk about that process. At this stage of your career, you're not necessarily a well-known director. So maybe you can talk about that process of getting into Cannes without necessarily having like a marquee name behind you.
Yeah, so there's, the distributors carry an enormous amount of weight with the film festivals, because that's what those film festivals are ultimately really designed for, is a marketplace to sell films to foreign buyers. And so they create the festival aspect of it, and I think the screening aspect of it, really more for opportunities for publicity and to create hype around certain projects. So there's a lot of different levels you can be on. And so for me, I was able to get my film picked up by a very small, third-tier distributor, but who had very strong connections at Cannes Film Festival and did an enormous amount of sales there and dealt primarily in foreign distribution. And so he was kind of connected enough and powerful enough to get the film not into real strong competition or anything, but just into screenings at the festival. And so being someone who's very young and has no real track record, to be there was, a pretty wild experience. And you get to see the global aspect of filmmaking and begin to understand that we're just a domestic marketplace here in the United States. And that's one small category when it comes to, I think, 36 territories and probably even more than that. And now you've got all these different avenues for distribution with new media and everything on the internet. So it was really more about being there and being part of this huge machine and seeing all the opportunities and where you can really go with it all.
Yeah. How did you get that distributor that was able to get it into Cannes? Was that a cold submission? Was that through networking, somebody you knew?
No, it was all through networking. I had actually done a film when I was a snowboarder, a feature film, and I kind of made friends with the production company, which was also the distribution company, and that was ultimately the company that I'd gone to. So I had been on a film where I was just doing some stunts and some acting, and then I was telling them, I'm going to start making my own movies, because I was really kind of hanging out with everybody that I could meet, and every project that I was on, I was taking as much advantage of it as I could. Mm-hmm. And so I was telling them, I'm going to go start making my own stuff. So then when I did, about a year goes by, and then I went back to him and I said, okay, well, I did. And they were like, what? And so I showed it to him, and, obviously that film, Las Paraditas, stands for itself. It's a pretty explosive documentary, and a lot of people have tried to go get that subject but haven't been able to. Mm-hmm. So that was another thing, is the subject I chose I knew would kind of kick some doors open just on its own when people saw it, and knew that it's not something that just anybody could get.
Yeah, perfect. So let's dig into your latest film, 211, starring Nicolas Cage. To start out, maybe you can give us a quick pitch or a logline for the film. What's this film all about?
Yeah, I mean, basically he plays a police officer who's kind of at the end of his career, getting ready to retire, and he's on a ride-along mission for the day with his partner. So they've got this young kid in the back seat who has been a bully victim at school, and he ends up fighting back to protect himself, and he's the one that ends up getting in trouble. So as they're doing their ride-along and kind of going through their mundane day, they come across a bank robbery that's in progress. And so, like the North Hollywood shootout, I'm not sure if you guys are aware of that situation, but that's what we used as a kind of underlying route for the story, because as we were developing it, we were looking for something that was a very condensed action movie that was kind of one location, but yet had some really strong dramatic elements to it. And so that's where the movie really just kind of takes off and becomes a hour-long standoff between these thieves, these heavily armed thieves, and these very underarmed and under-equipped police officers who are caught slipping in the very beginning. Mm-hmm. And it ultimately culminates in the end with them progressing to take them out. And Nick Cage is pretty much the eyes of the audience as you're following him through his journey and experiencing this whole thing.
I see. Perfect. Let's dig into your writing process a little bit. Where do you typically write?
At home. Just on my couch, usually. I have a unique process of writing. For me, I don't do an enormous amount of outlining ahead of time. I'll get right into it and just start. I have a pretty strong vision of what I want the film to be, because when we'll develop films now, it's a very analytical process, almost in a lot of ways like reverse engineering. I'll sit down with the studio, I'll sit down with everyone involved, and we'll kind of say, this is what our end game is, this is what we want the film to be, and where we want it to go, and who we want to be in it. And then I can then kind of create these stepping stones backwards of how to get to that place. This is all kind of from experience and now really understanding a lot of how everything works. And so, like with this film specifically, we said, okay, we want a very condensed action movie, one location with a lot of dramatic elements. I started researching, had remembered that North Hollywood shootout situation, started looking into that and realized, okay, here's something we can use as a route. And then we can start to take liberties to bring in some subplots and some storylines that will help accommodate actors' performances and being able to have a really strong, well-rounded film.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like this is all sort of your outlining phase. You're kind of just preparing to actually do the writing, correct?
Yeah, and so then when I sit down to it, I have a real and strong idea in my head of structurally how it's going to be, and I'll start outlining it just page one, and I'll do about 60 pages, and that'll be the whole story laid out in just pretty much action lines, a few dialogue pieces here and there, but it's pretty much all action lines. And then from that point, those are all written in a way that they'll trigger me in my mind to remember exactly how that will need to be expanded out. And so then on the second passes, I start going through them and expanding that out. And within about 3 passes, I'll have it at 100 pages. And everything's kind of placed where it needs to be. I don't have a lot of restructuring or anything that needs to be done at that point. And then we start polishing down. Mm-hmm. And so it's a very precise way of doing it, and it gets you there very quickly as long as you really have a strong vision and know exactly what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah. And so what does that development process look like? It sounds like you've brought in a studio or a distributor early on. Do you send them, after you have this third, fourth draft that you're happy with, do you send them the script? Do you get notes? Do you have some other people, writer, friends or something that give you notes on your material?
Yeah, I do. I have a few friends and some people that I give it out to. Obviously, my representation. We work very closely and have for a long time now. I've been doing this for almost 10 years, and so I've been with the same people since the beginning. So we've got just a strong connection and trust between all of us. So I'll send it out to a small group of people, get notes from them. When the studio gets involved, that's obviously becomes much more of a collaboration because they're ultimately financing and distributing, and they're on before the film's being made. So they've got, just as much say as anybody, and we all work as a team, and everyone has input because there's so much more to the process than just making the film. You have to really be thinking about how you're going to be marketing the film as well, and what elements you're going to need to capture during production that are going to help with the marketing.
Yeah. How do you approach screenplay structure? There's sort of the Sid Field, Blake Snyder, very much the 3-act, the sort of the traditional 3-act structure. Some people are maybe a little more fluid. What's your take on screenplay structure?
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's that old saying, you have to know the rules to be able to break them. So I studied for a very long time silent film, and I studied really how to structure telling stories with just using pictures and sounds only, without the dialogue, and you begin to learn that you can tell a whole story like that. So if you come at it from that point of view, trying to only tell your story with just pictures and sounds, and then just bring the dialogue in when you absolutely need to, I think is when your product becomes much more organic that way. Mm-hmm. And that's definitely one way I've grown to kind of start to look at it.
Yeah. And what about genre requirements, especially with a film like this, a Nicolas Cage sort of action movie? There's sort of, in action films, there's the typical thing of, you need an action set piece every 10 pages. Are there any genre requirements that maybe the studio was pushing on you, or just how do you sort of face those, whether it be an action movie or even, I guess, horror or any of these genre thrillers?
Yeah, not as technical, I think, as you're getting at. It's more of, look, we're making an action movie, so we need action, Mm-hmm. So if you're writing and you're going through 20 pages and there really isn't a lot of action, you're going to say, hey, look, we need to get into some action here. So I don't think it's as technical as hitting page breaks and character bumps and that kind of stuff at certain moments, mm-hmm. as you just have more of an overall balance of action to drama. So you want to have those really heavy action moments, and then you want to come out of those and give the audience a little bit of a breath and tell them a little bit more of the story, and then set them back up and then come back in for even stronger action. Mm-hmm. And there has to be somewhat of a heartbeat to that all the way through. Otherwise, it becomes very redundant, and you just have the same thing kind of being repetitious over and over.
Yeah, for sure. So at what point did Nicolas Cage become involved with this project? Did you have a script and did you get financing, or did you get Nicolas Cage involved before financing?
No, so I had written the screenplay, and obviously Millennium came in and picked the movie up and wanted to make it. So we were getting ready to start casting it, and they had worked with him a lot in the past and wanted to work with him again. And so we had a connection to his representation, and obviously the studio had a strong connection with him. So we sent it to him and offered him the role, and I guess he read the screenplay and he really liked it. And that's where it all starts, with the screenplay, and it's got to be on the page. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things I can tell the listeners is that you got to write your screenplay in a way where it draws that actor and makes them want to do it, And so he read it, he liked it, and he wanted to meet with me. So I flew out and met him, and we had a lunch together, and we talked about how I wanted to do the character and what he wanted to do with it and everything. And we hit it off, and so he said, yeah, I'll do it. And so that's kind of how that came together, and we were off shooting it maybe about a month later.
Perfect. What advice do you have for people trying to break in, whether it be TV or documentaries or feature films?
I mean, I would say, you got to get out there and just do it. I see a lot of people kind of working on a screenplay, and you got to remember they're never going to be perfect. You just got to get to a point where you trust that it's where it needs to be, and it's going to work, and it's going to translate onto the screen. And if you really kind of get hung up on, if people are going to like it or not, those are some of the obstacles that people will trip over, because you can never control that. 51-49, hopefully 51% like it and not 49, because that's just how it is. Half are gonna and half aren't. Some people might watch it today and dislike it, and watch it a week from now and they really enjoy it because something in their life happened that they now relate to within that film. Mm-hmm. So I think you just need to trust your instincts as a filmmaker and educate yourself so that you can trust them. And then you just do what you want to do, and you put it out there, and that's the best that you can do. But without putting it out there, you're not going to ever really compete. So get in the game.
Yeah, for sure. What's next for you? What else are you working on?
I'm going into Alabama here in a couple of weeks. I'm going to go shoot a movie with Guy Pearce called Disturbing the Peace for Voltage. Yeah. So that should be fun. It's going to be another heist movie. It's about a kind of small town marshal, and these guys come into town to rob a Indian casino, and he ends up stopping them.
Perfect, perfect. Have you seen anything that you would recommend to our viewers? Anything on Netflix, HBO? I just kind of like to wrap up the interviews, just kind of getting a feel for what the guest is watching.
This is what I can tell you. I watch films whenever I'm writing or whatever I'm working on. I'll create a playlist of films that inspire me in a lot of different ways, whether it be shots or music, feelings, or anything that I just think that film or those series of films relate to, kind of in a sense what I'm going to be doing. And I'll play those in my house just on loop over and over and over again. I'll catch certain moments as I'm walking through the living room, and you'll start to see a movie in pieces rather than in a full length, whole entirety. And it just starts to give you these different perspectives. You start to notice background extras, performances, and things like that. And I don't know, it's hard to explain, but I can tell you that doing that, I picked up just an enormous amount of subtle things that come out when I'm directing and I'm on set that sometimes I don't even think about. I'm like, where the hell did I even get that from? But I realize it's because subconsciously I've been having, playlists of films looping for months before I go and do that film. So I just have a lot of stuff ingrained in me. Yeah. So that's what I do. Yeah, I know I got Blade Runner going. I got The Foreigner. I got Snowman. I got American Made. I got Dunkirk. I got Wind River. It's kind of on my playlist right now, sitting on the top of this counter.
Yeah, nice. How can people see 211? Do you know what the release schedule is going to be like?
Yeah, I know it's coming out in the States June 8th, and there's already some foreign releases set. I'm not sure on those dates, but definitely June 8th here in the United States in theaters and pay-per-view.
Perfect. And what's the best way for people to keep up with what you're doing? Twitter, Facebook, a blog, anything you're comfortable sharing, I'll round up for the show notes.
Yeah, I've got all those. I've got Twitter and Facebook. They're all my name, York Shackleton.
Okay.
And, come hang out and say hi. And I try to answer everyone's questions, if anyone comes over there and wants to know what's going on. I try to keep up with everybody as much as possible.
Yeah, perfect. So I'll round that up and put those in the show notes so people can click over. Well, York, I really appreciate it. This has been a great interview. Lots of great insight. I wish you well with this film.
Okay, thanks so much, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. We'll talk to you later.
Okay, take care.
Bye.
A quick plug for the SYS Screenwriting Analysis Service. It's a really economical way to get a high-quality professional evaluation on your screenplay. When you buy our 3-pack, you get evaluations at just $67 per script for feature films and just $55 for teleplays. All the readers have professional experience reading for studios, production companies, contests, and agencies. You can read a short bio on each reader on our website, and you can pick the reader who you think is the best fit for your script. Turnaround time is usually just a few days, but rarely more than a week. The readers will evaluate your script on 6 key factors: concept, character, structure, marketability, tone, and overall craft, which includes formatting, spelling, and grammar. Every script will get a grade of pass, consider, or recommend, which should help you roughly understand where your script might rank if you were to submit it to a production company or agency. We can provide an analysis on features or television scripts. We also do proofreading without any analysis. We will also look at a treatment or outline and give you the same analysis on it. So if you're looking to vet some of your project ideas, this is a great way to do it. We will also write your logline and synopsis for you. You can add this logline and synopsis writing service to an analysis, or you can simply purchase this service as a standalone product. As a bonus, if your screenplay gets a recommend or a consider from one of our readers, you get to list the screenplay in the SYS Select database, which is a database for producers to find screenplays and a big part of our SYS Select program. Producers are in the database searching for material on a daily basis, so it's another great way to get your material in front of them. As a further bonus, if your script gets a recommend from one of our readers, your screenplay will get included in our monthly Best Of newsletter. Each month we send out a newsletter that highlights the best screenplays that have come through our script analysis service. This is a monthly newsletter that goes out to our list of over 400 producers who are actively looking for material. So again, this is another great way to get your material out there. So if you want a professional evaluation,
of your screenplay at a very reasonable price, check out www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/consultants. Again, that's sellingyourscreenplay.com/consultants. On the next episode of the podcast, I'm going to be interviewing director Matthew Ross, who just did a feature film with Keanu Reeves called Siberia. We talked through how this film came together, as well as how he was able to jumpstart his career with his first feature film, Frank and Lola. So keep an eye out for that episode next week. That's our show. Thank you for listening.